This is Attorney Todd Hollis. Welcome to another episode of Civil Action. You know what? 40 candidates, I think. 40 candidates for Court of Common Pleas judge, and every one of them are qualified. So the question is, which one will you elect to sit on the bench of Court of Common Pleas judge? I've got 3 new candidates here today that are going to present themselves, going to introduce their platforms in hopes that you'll choose them as Court of Common Pleas judge in this 2021 season. Candidates, welcome. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Todd.
Doing fine, Todd.
Hey man, I know I've known each and every one of you guys for, I want to say, at least over 10 years. Some of you longer. So I'm just tickled pink, to see you guys, taking the bench or potentially trying to take the bench to sit as Court of Common Pleas judges. And I know you're busy, so I can't thank you enough for taking time out to hang out with me. I have, I've done this a number of times before, but I really know that people aren't interested in what I have to say. They're really interested in you. So I'm going to ask each and every one of you, and Mr. Koneiczka, I see you at the top of my screen. I'm going to ask if you would just take a moment and introduce yourself and your potential platform to your prospective constituents.
Well, thank you, Todd, for hosting this podcast. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the people here. My name is Koneiczka. I am a candidate for judge of the Court of Common Pleas. I grew up in Morningside section, city of Pittsburgh. I'm the oldest of 8 children. My professional career, I was a prosecutor in the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office for 23 and a half years. I prosecuted hundreds of cases and or supervised the prosecution of hundreds more. When I left the District Attorney's Office in 2011, I was the supervisor of the Violent Crime, Firearms, and Felony Narcotics Unit. When I left the District Attorney's Office in 2011, I became a partner in a law firm of DeLuca, Rossetti, and Koneiczka. My primary area of practice was that of criminal defense. I represented criminal defendants here in Allegheny County and throughout Western Pennsylvania. I also was appointed to the federal CJA panel. You get appointed by the Federal Public Defender's Office and the federal judges. Once you're appointed, they then assigned you as an attorney to represent indigent federal defendants who are many times facing decades of incarceration at the federal level. So I took that job rather serious. The one reason why I was appointed was because of my courtroom experience. I have 34 years of courtroom experience. I've been highly recommended by the Allegheny County Bar Association. In fact, I think I'm one of the few candidates that is running right now that has a unique background. I prosecuted at the state and local level. I also prosecuted at the federal level in the mid-90s. I was assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute the Larimer Avenue Wilkinsburg gang. I actually won a national award that was presented to me by then Attorney General Janet Reno for superior performance. I've also now criminally defended at the state and local level and also at the federal level. I am currently honored to serve as the magisterial district judge in Shaler, Etna, Millville, and Reserve. I've been serving there for the last 3 years. So I'm making decisions right now on a daily basis that can affect individual lives, whether it's a traffic offense for just running a stop sign in which you have to pay a fine of $143 and potentially suffer 3 points, or a truancy or a landlord-tenant civil up to $12,000. So I am currently making decisions that I consider very important because they impact normal human beings and can affect their lives. So that's sort of my background. I've been married for 34 years, beautiful wife, Maureen. I've lived in Shaler Township since 1992. So thank you, Todd, for inviting me to address your audience.
I remember my experience with you when I became a new defense attorney back in the early 90s, and how kind you were. I certainly, am honored to have you here today. And I certainly apologize. I didn't know that you were serving presently as a magisterial judge. So now I will make that correction going forward.
Judge, only a title, Todd.
Well, you know what? You're entitled to it. You deserve it, and I'm gonna make sure that I refer to that going forward. I see you at the bottom left of my corner, Judge Pappas. How are you?
Thanks, Todd. I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me here.
Well, I've known you before you started practicing law, and I've seen, the great things that you've been doing throughout your career. I know your mom, but I'm not gonna do the speaking for you. Do me a favor, introduce yourself and tell the potential constituents about your platform.
Thanks again for inviting me here, Todd. My name is Judge Mik Pappas. I'm a magisterial district judge representing 8 neighborhoods in the east end of the city of Pittsburgh. Before I was a district judge, I was an innocence defense and civil rights attorney. That was the majority of my practice as an attorney. Before that, I worked in government through the state Senate. And before that, I was a community organizer working in cities throughout the United States, including Newark, New Jersey, New Orleans before the flood, and South Chicago, and of course, Pittsburgh, my hometown. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, and I'm running for the Court of Common Pleas because as somebody who grew up in East Liberty before Whole Foods and before Home Depot, when it was full of high-rises plagued by gun violence and drugs, I've seen firsthand how the legal system can make a difference in somebody's life in a positive way and can cause harm to people and communities. I've seen firsthand as someone whose own family has experienced domestic violence, as someone whose own family has had to recover from that, how hard it can be for victims to come forward when they don't trust the justice system. And I'm running for Common Pleas because my goal is to restore trust, justice, and equity to our legal system here in Allegheny County.
Well, I'm honored to have you on the show. I've watched some of the things that you've done in this community, and like I said, I believe you make a great candidate. I've known this next guest. I mean, I feel like we kind of started together, right, Ilan?
It's been a long time, Todd.
Yeah, man. I remember one case that I had with you in particular. We'll talk about it. Yes,
I remember that one.
Yeah,
you did a good job there. You did your job there. It was a not guilty, and it probably should have been.
Well, you know what, man? You were honorable. You were fair, and you did it the right way. So
thanks, man. I appreciate that.
I couldn't be happier to see you here today. And when I got the call that you were, seeking candidacy, I thought this is just awesome.
Thanks.
So I've known you. Do me a favor, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your platform.
Sure, Todd. So number one, I really appreciate you inviting me on this. It's a great opportunity to reach the voters. So thank you.
My pleasure.
My name is Ilan Zur, and I'm running for judge on the Court of Common Pleas. I was born in New York City, but I've called Pittsburgh home since 1990, so about 30 years now when I moved here for school. Proud alumni of Carnegie Mellon University and Pitt Law. My wife, Lisa, and I live in Squirrel Hill with our 3 children. And recently my mom actually moved in with me also from New York. So really never a dull moment over here. But before I get into my legal experience, which qualifies me to serve on the Court of Common Pleas, I did want to address something, Todd. As you know, I've been a prosecutor my entire legal career, which is 22 years now. As I began my campaign for judge, I reached out to a consulting firm and was told it's a bad climate for prosecutors. I was on a call with the 14th Ward Independent Club in which a state rep said that the Black community doesn't trust prosecutors. I was on a Zoom candidates forum, which a colleague running for judge said that we should not elect prosecutors to the bench. And even on your show, as I was preparing for it and watching an old video, I heard the same exact sentiment. I'm not naive. I understand why such a sentiment exists, but it's still difficult for me to hear. I'm not that prosecutor. I don't think that jail is the answer. Quite the opposite. All I ask for is that people keep an open mind and listen to what I have to say before making assumptions about me due to my job. What you have to understand is that I wanted to work in the DA's office because I wanted to help people. I wanted to be a voice for victims of crime. I didn't want to work in a big private law firm. I'm committed to public service. It's what motivates me. I spent the majority of my career as a homicide prosecutor. And Todd, I'm not talking about vehicular homicides or that are DUI related or other manslaughter cases, accidental type cases. What I'm talking about is prosecuting people who have committed first-degree murder. That's what my career has been about. First-degree murder is someone who kills somebody with a premeditated intent to kill. And I've spent my career helping families by trying to give them a measure of justice, by holding the person who was murdered, their loved ones, accountable. What motivates me to do my job is not putting people in jail. It's the feeling I get when the mother or the father or murder victim thank me for the work that I have done, because they know that I've put everything I have into preparing a case for trial and seeking justice for them. And that brings me to my legal experience. Over the course of my 22-year career, I've spent thousands of hours in the courtroom. I've tried over 400 cases before a judge, another 100 before a jury, and 60 which were murder trials. And the reason I specifically mention the murder trials is because they're extensive. They take 1 to 2 weeks. You call dozens of witnesses, and they take a lot of time to prepare. And as a result, you gain a lot of perspective. You learn a lot. And all of this experience in court has taught me that the most important qualities for a judge to have are being open-minded, being fair, free of bias, and compassionate. I've learned to never assume something just because I'm assigned a case. I don't assume the person's guilty. I review the case for myself. I've withdrawn homicide charges before because I didn't believe the case had enough evidence to move forward. I've withdrawn charges because evidence surfaced that the person was innocent. And I've chosen not to prosecute a case just because it was the right thing to do, even though I could have proven the case. I take my role as a DA seriously. I realize the impact my decisions have on the individual and the families and the community. I recognize the effect a criminal record has on someone's life, especially a first-time felony conviction. My point is that I use discretion before proceeding on a criminal case. My courtroom and life experience have taught me that everyone's capable of lying, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. What I can promise if I'm elected is that I will listen to both sides before ever rendering a verdict, and that I will consider the full context of a person's life before ever imposing a sentence. I'm not just going to consider the crime committed. It's important to understand the motivations for that crime. Was it as a result of a dependency on drugs or some other reason? And I also understand that just because you commit a crime, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. People make mistakes, and I believe strongly in second chances. I've learned what a good judge is and a bad one. I won't forget what it's like practicing as an attorney in court, and I'm going to be respectful and patient with the people who come before me if I'm fortunate enough to be elected. In compassion, as I mentioned, and perspective, also very necessary qualities for a judge to have. As someone who prosecutes cases in which sometimes the penalty is life without parole, I understand the impact a homicide verdict has not only on the victim's family, but also the defendants. I've been in that courtroom when the verdict is read, whether it be guilty or not guilty. I've heard the crying from both the defendant's family and the victims. Lives are destroyed forever, and none of that is lost on me. And it's a perspective that I will take with me to the bench. A perspective that life is precious and that jail is the last resort and that should be largely limited to those who commit violent offenses. And thank you, Todd, for having me, and I'm enjoying and I look forward to the rest of the conversation. So thanks.
Yeah, this show was never really meant to be a debate. It was really meant to give you guys an opportunity for your constituents to make a connection. I sometimes impart, my own experiences with candidates just because I believe it's important to give perspective and context. I never believed that the Black community somehow didn't trust prosecutors. You guys play a super important role. As you alluded to moments ago, you do have the ability to use great discretion during the course of, your prosecution. I've personally had experiences with both you and Judge Koneiczka, and I know that you use that discretion and you don't abuse it, and that speaks volumes. I was there. Yeah, I was there when I looked out my back window and I saw Judge Pappas cleaning up the alleyway that was blocks away from his home, something that he didn't even have to do, and he had organized the neighborhood kids in such a way. And I think you were in college at the time, Judge Pappas. So all three of you, are more than qualified to sit on the bench and sheesh, I would be honored, to step into a courtroom and to see all three of you guys, presiding over my case.
Thanks, Todd.
So having said that, now, I wanted to switch things up just a little bit just to keep the show kind of interesting, right? So I have a pretty big social media platform, and I asked three of my, my Facebook friends, if you had an opportunity to ever speak to a potential judge, what are the questions that you're concerned about that you'd like their perspective on? So I got three different questions. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to present those three questions to each one of you. And I'm going to start with you, Judge Koneiczka. And then if Judge Pappas or Mr. Zur, if either one of you guys kind of want to chime in after Judge Koneiczka has an opportunity to respond, that would be great. Does that sound good to you?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome.
Candidates, what are your thoughts on pretrial diversion? I was once a lawman and an outlaw, so you get the best of both worlds with me. And one of the things that I've been hypercritical with our judges and our justice system is you don't see them swaying away from the guidelines and offering these young first-time offenders some type of a diversion. Once I was a police officer and I had arrested a kid with 4 rocks of crack, and I knew he wasn't a bad guy. And it was just a crowd that he was running with. And I told him, I said, I'm going to recommend to the DA that you go to the Army or Armed Forces or something, and they dismiss these charges. I ran into him about 5 years ago, and was sitting in the bar, and he walked up to me and he said my entire name. Anytime somebody says my entire name, I know it's somebody I arrested before. He said, "You don't remember me?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "I'm now a master sergeant in the Army, and I just want to thank you because everybody that you arrested that day with me is now dead or in jail." And I just think I would like to see a judge on the bench that thinks non-traditionally and like to do some type of pretrial diversion, because ultimately you guys are the ultimate fact finder of jurisprudence in our criminal justice system. And it would be good to see someone be able to tender mercy along with justice at the same time.
So Judge Koneiczka, you were a prosecutor for many, many, many years. So I'm sure this question probably hits home with you. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's actually a great question. As a magisterial district judge, believe it or not, Judge Pappas and I do have some discretion. And I'm sure that Judge Pappas exercises as much as that I do. For an example, a good example for pretrial diversion would be a domestic violence case. Even though the prosecutor has control over whether that case goes downtown or not, a judge, if they're knowledgeable enough, can sort of sway in many instances. So in a domestic violence case, you don't want to have someone have a conviction, so you divert that to anger management classes, veterans intervention program, have them successfully complete the program, educate themselves so that they know what brought on. If drugs and alcohol are involved, have a drug and alcohol evaluation, follow up with any counseling and or therapy, and that case never goes downtown. I also, because I spent a long time dealing with felony narcotics cases, I spent my whole career dealing with drug offenders, but I find that they're not drug offenders. They are drug dependents. And I basically have learned that just because someone got addicted, they're not bad, as Judge Pappas had indicated. And in most instances, what they really need is either counseling, therapy. A lot of times there's mental health issues along that led them to use of drugs. I know over the last, let's say, 10 years, the rise in the use of heroin has basically been because people got addicted to OxyContin or Percocets and Percodan because they had an injury and the doctor prescribed them some pills. And then eventually the doctor ceased to prescribe those pills, so they had to go somewhere else. Again, in my courtroom, any minor drug cases, I do my best to make sure that we get the counseling that they need right away because I'm seeing the case within 10 no later than 30 days from the offense, and trying to get them what they need. And I have enough of the experience that I can sort of sway a prosecutor that this is sort of the way to go. So I agree wholeheartedly that we should be diverting a lot more cases. And just going along those same thoughts, we have veteran court, we have drug court, we have DUI court. Those cases, they have to go downtown. It'd be nice to have those types of some sort of programs out at the magisterial district level so that we can divert those cases a little bit earlier in the system, because otherwise they have to wait 3, 4, 6 months down the road to potentially get the counseling that they need, whether they're veterans, whether they're drug abusers or whatever. So I'm a big believer in that, and I put into practice as a magisterial district judge over the last 3 years, taking that into strong consideration.
Great points. Mik, Ilan?
I would love to respond to that question if I could, and I would echo some of what Judge Koneiczka has said. I've seen that his reliance on cash bail has been significantly reduced compared to what we expected of some of our district judges years ago, and I admire him for that. I've made a point to entirely eliminate my reliance on cash bail, and the only way you can do that is by coming up with alternatives. Now, let me just step back for 1 minute. We as a society over-rely on arrest and incarceration to solve our social problems. Point blank, period. We are an outlier in the world for this. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated persons. We outpace China and Russia in these regards. And this is a blemish on our reputation throughout the world, and judges are leaders within the justice system. They need to be speaking on these issues and doing something about them. Okay, now, stepping forward, we have 80% of defendants eligible for a public defender. We have 80% of defendants posing no risk whatsoever, or maybe more, posing no risk whatsoever to public safety. Yet, because we rely so much on arrest and incarceration to solve our social problems, they end up in a squad car, they end up in front of a judge, okay? Judge Koneiczka and I have had the pleasure of being that first judge they get to see, because in their first hearing, they have an arraignment. They get to be presented with their charges, and they get to be presented with a set of questions that assesses their eligibility for bail, right? And these are not questions regarding their case. In fact, the rules specifically forbid us from asking about the merits of a case. These are questions that assess someone's stability. What are their sources of support? Where are they going to go when they're released? Can the court do anything to help provide or recommend a housing solution for somebody? And so what they call this is kind of the second intercept. Recently in Pittsburgh, in terms of a diversion model, there's an intercept at each stage of the prosecution process. The first is by an encounter on the street with a police officer. And there has been a diversion program specifically geared towards youth on the north side, now moving over into the east end through the Foundation of Hope, that is geared towards officers making that first intercept, taking a young offender or a young accused somewhere other than the jail, somewhere other than Schumann, rather than arrest. Something similar has been implemented for folks who have been identified as having some sort of mental health disability. This is through crisis intervention training that a lot of the police in the city of Pittsburgh have gone through, and also throughout the county. But my thought on this is that a police officer on the street is making split-second decisions. It's much harder for them to determine if a diversion would be appropriate at that point. Whereas if you come in front of a judge in an arraignment, a judge is sitting in a courtroom. It's quiet. The judge is disinterested, making a thoughtful decision and balancing all the different factors in a case. And I think that's really a good place for the diversion. And that's why I've really advocated for alternatives to cash bail, specifically for folks who have disabilities, pose no risk to the community, or even if they do pose a risk to the community, would suffer terrible harm by the conditions in Allegheny County Jail, and we should find another place for them that would keep them safe and that would keep the community safe. Now, I have to say that a lot of the diversions that are available at that stage are available through government resources. And I've been a big advocate of something that's an alternative to that, for which there is models elsewhere in the country called community-sponsored release. We have an abundance of community-based organizations in our region that are strongly vested in outcomes in criminal cases, trying to find diversion resources, trying to model their programs around how can we divert folks from the criminal justice system and get them on the right path. We as courts have to get these organizations, these stakeholders involved. For so long, courts have been so opaque, and it's been a fortunate few kind of organization model, but we've really got to expand that because we're in a wonderful position to be able to refer people who have deep needs to organizations that specialize in serving those types of folks. Now, the reason I think it's so important to elevate someone with my vision for alternatives to common pleas is because from a common pleas position, you really have more of a role in the administration of the courts. You really have more of a role in working with pretrial services, juvenile probation, adult probation, and you're on the board of judges. So you have a say in what local rules we pass, which can fundamentally transform how we deal with matters at every level, specifically whenever it comes to when a judge is considering incarceration at any level of the process. It's not just about bail, and I'll finish up with this. 40% of our county jail population are there on probation detainers. So this is somebody who has already been sentenced and for some reason or another had an encounter with law enforcement and is being detained post-trial, not up at the front, but in the back. And as a judge, and I'm sure Judge Koneiczka can speak to this, no matter what bail I set, that person is going to be detained until they go in front of their common pleas judge, unless that judge has already set a policy on certain offenses or gets to review it very quickly. And so that's a huge portion of our jail population. And why is it that our probation department is having such a hard time, right, with that? How can we as judges work with probation to connect them and others to the community in a way that makes diversion more of a community-based model rather than a system approach?
Yeah. I mean, as a defense attorney for 27 plus years, it seemed like a lot of the bail programs were meant to be punitive as opposed to using them in such a way that it would help the individual. So it's interesting to hear your perspectives. Mr. Zur.
Yes, thanks.
Anything you want to add?
It's interesting that we all have different perspectives regarding this question. Obviously, Judge Koneiczka and Judge Pappas from the bench, me as a prosecutor. And the question really, it speaks to me because it's exactly how I feel. I just think that we have too many, just because somebody commits a crime and you can charge them doesn't mean you should. Okay, that's when the discretion comes in. And I understand, just like Judge Pappas said, sometimes the police on the street, they don't have enough time to make those decisions and think about it thoughtfully. And that's where we come in, especially, as a prosecutor, after they've seen usually Judge Pappas or Judge Koneiczka, the case comes through my desk for assignment. And like Judge Koneiczka, I now currently supervise the narcotics and the violent crimes unit in the district attorney's office. So I review probably a large percentage of the narcotics cases that occur in Allegheny County. Of course, the Attorney General's office and the U.S. Attorney's office also prosecute, but it's the district attorney's office that sees most of these cases, and they pass by my desk in the form of a file, and I review them. Now, based on my experience, I now know what to look for. I can tell a case if that is a drug dealer for profit or is this someone who is dependent on drugs. And I have the ability in my position as a supervisor now to divert that case to the right place. I can send it to a trial unit or I can send it to our drug court program, which is encompassed in the narcotics division and is run by one of the people I supervise. So in that sense, I agree and I completely support it. There's no benefit sometimes for jail. People don't necessarily are going to turn themselves around. I think it's the opposite. And like I said earlier, jail should be reserved for the people we need to be protected from, not for nonviolent offenses. And for those types of offenses, we should 100% support diversionary programs. We should try to avoid giving somebody a criminal record if we can. And that's my goal as a DA now. And if I'm elected to the bench, I'll be looking at things the same exact way. So thanks.
All right, thank you. My next question comes from Miss Marita Blake. She has a question that she'd like to present to you, Judge Pappas.
Hi, my name's Marita, and today I have an important topic to discuss with our potential candidates. In this day and age, we are seeing more social disparities in our judicial system than ever before. We have racial disparity, we have financial disparity. This is a judicial system that is meant to be neutral and equal, yet many families and individuals, both from low income and middle class portions of society, do not have the resources that is required to get adequate legal assistance when it comes to complicated judicial matters. As a potential candidate for judge, what measures do you feel could be put in place to address these disparities and inequalities and close the gap in our judicial system?
Judge Pappas.
So we are coming off of a year of 2020 where we saw millions of people take to the streets to demand a more equitable justice system. We are coming off of a year, the likes of which we've never experienced. And unless we take affirmative steps, actors within the system, judges and everybody else who their decisions become the policy of the system. Unless those folks specifically step up, then it's only going to keep happening over and over again. It's only going to keep getting worse, and people are going to have less and less confidence in what happens in courts, that they're fair and that the outcomes are the result of a equitable process. Now, after the killing of George Floyd, I issued a statement along with judges in judicial districts all over the country. Yet I was the only judge who issued a statement in Pennsylvania in response to what occurred. Like I said, there were dozens of judges in judicial districts all over the country that did so, yet the only judge in Pennsylvania. And what I said was that my courtroom is going to be a safe space. My courtroom is going to be a place where we're going to commit to confronting systemic inequality and oppression within our justice system. Now, where does that inequality come from? Of course, it's institutional, but it's really hard to understand why an institution that is not overtly racist, that prohibits discrimination, can still produce such disparate outcomes, which are so well known. And a part of the answer is implicit bias. Part of the answer is that we are all programmed from the day that we're born, and our minds take shortcuts to help us understand the world around us. And as a judge, one thing that you have to do is first acknowledge that all of us can have implicit bias without necessarily being hateful or racist, number one. Number two, as a judge, you have to examine your own deliberative process with each decision that you make. And last but not least, as a judge, you have to engage with the community on this issue, because there are experts in our neighborhoods, there are experts in our communities who can help us understand this problem and help us fix it. I was honored that soon after I issued my statement, President Judge Clark reached out to me and she asked me, how can we engage the community on this issue? And as a result of that conversation, we now have the Racial Equity Working Group for the 5th Judicial District, which Judge Koneiczka is a part, and I'm a part. And what we're doing is having those conversations so that then we can grow them in a much larger way and prepare our judges to look within themselves and understand how prejudice may seep into their own decision-making.
Great points. Mr. Zur.
As Judge Pappas was talking, I was thinking, what's my answer going to be? And as soon as I was thinking it, he took the words right out of my mouth. And I think it does come down to an acknowledgement as to implicit bias. It's very important. And what we can do as judges, in fact, the only thing I think we can do as judges is to be open-minded. And you get that from perspective and get that from experience. And as Judge Pappas said, to recognize that everyone has implicit bias is probably the first step. And it could be a judgment based on the way somebody's dressed, their appearances. And we all recognize that, you may not even realize why you feel the way you do, But over the course of a lifetime, these are things that are ingrained in you, and you have to acknowledge that they exist. And in order to combat it, you have to take a step back, look at the case, and make sure you're making the decisions and what you're thinking for the right reasons, not based on any sort of superficial reasons such as an appearance. And primarily, I think that's the way each judge can handle it. And collectively, if all the judges are doing the same thing and are open-minded and are aware of these issues, then eventually we're going to get the change that we need, I think, in our criminal justice system.
Okay. Judge Koneiczka.
I think Judge Pappas and Ilan were eloquent in talking about the implicit bias. I want to take a little bit more of a practical approach because I was kind of amazed because most of my practice, like I've already indicated, was in the criminal law aspect. But when I took the bench, I had landlord-tenant and civil complaints in front of me. And the disparity between, and this is socioeconomic, is amazing. You have poor tenants who showed up who are going to be evicted or potentially being evicted, and you have landlords who have legal representation. They've been in the business for many years, and the disparity between the two is just amazing. And the other thing I learned was that the neighborhood legal services really doesn't get involved until a judge makes an adverse decision against a tenant. Now, as a judge, you're supposed to be neutral. But in those particular instances, you can't help yourself but being a judge, and you got to try to make sure that both sides are heard, and you can actually sort of quote unquote help the tenant. The same thing with civil cases and a credit card. You have an attorney representing the credit card company, and you have a poor individual who may be thousands of dollars into debt because of all kinds of reasons, and they have no legal representation. And as a judge, you have to have that compassion, and you have to have the knowledge. I feel blessed that I've been doing this for 34 years. I know the system, so I know how to navigate. I know how to at least make the scales equal in my courtroom. I just wish we'd be able to do that in a broader way. And that's one of the things that I would like to be able to do, both at the common pleas level, as Judge Pappas has indicated, because you have a greater impact because you're looking at all of Allegheny County. It's one thing to have an impact in Shaler, Etna, Millville, and Reserve. It's another thing to broaden that throughout the county. So that would be something that I would be greatly striving for if I was lucky enough to become a judge in the Court of Common Pleas.
All right. Awesome points. The next question comes from Ms. Monica Malik. And I'm going to present that question to you, Mr. Zur.
Hi, my name is Monica, and my question is, do you consider yourself a politician?
Well, that's pretty straightforward.
100% no. And that's probably my shortcoming in this campaigning. I am not a politician. Not at all. Ask it. I'm sure Todd will tell you it's the complete opposite of me.
Okay. Judge Koneiczka, Judge Pappas.
I agree with Ilan. I am not a politician. I think a politician has to be a self-promoter. I've never done that my whole career. I just want to try to do what's right in the system. So, no, that might be one of my drawbacks in campaigning as a Court of Common Pleas judge candidate, is I am not a politician. So, no.
Okay. Judge Pappas.
No, I'm not a politician. Quite the opposite. I'm a judge, and therefore I work within the non-political branch of government. But we've got to we select judges, and we select judges through a political process, whether it's through electoral process or whether it's through the appointment process. And I do believe that there are a lot of things we can do within that selection process to make it less political. I would only say that throughout my 20-year career in community government and the law, I've always stayed on the side of keeping the community interests in heart, keeping the rights of individuals at heart. So I wasn't, advocating for one politician or another whenever I worked for the League of Young Voters. I was registering voters to vote throughout Pennsylvania in jails and public housing communities. I wasn't, working for one elected or another. It was always for me about empowering communities to exercise their collective will through the electoral process.
All right. This social media, platform that we're using now, I think is an invaluable tool. When I was voting, I guess when I was, 20 some odd years ago, and I showed up at the poll, I just saw a slate of names. And if I was Democratic, I selected Democratic. If I was Republican, then I hit Republican. But, this is an opportunity for people to make connections with you guys. Connections that are meaningful in the sense that, if they've never met, Ilan Zur in the courtroom, thank God, then, they would have an opportunity to make this connection and to get his perspective on important issues that are meaningful in our society. And, vice versa for, Judge Pappas and Judge Koneiczka. If somebody never entered into your courtroom and they didn't have an opportunity to meet you, then this is the opportunity for them to get to know you. So the last thing that I really want to do before we close up for this show is I want to give your potential constituents an opportunity to determine why they should vote for you. I mean, there are 40 plus candidates in this election. And, the question is why should they pull that lever for you? And I know, Mr. Zur, we started with you. We ended with you. So we're going to start with you, and then we're going to go right back around. We're going to then go to Judge Pappas, and then we're going to finish up with you, Judge Konelczka. So, Mr. Zur, why should they vote for you?
Thanks, Todd. So, as I think I stated earlier, there are numerous qualities a judge should have, but the most important ones are going to be objective and to have compassion. And I think you get that through experience. So experience is obviously a very, very important to have if you're running for Court of Common Pleas judge. Now, I think that my experience is unique, even amongst the crowded field running for judge. There are plenty of attorneys running for judge that have been practicing law for 20 plus years like me. However, even those that do have that experience, they haven't spent the majority of that time in a courtroom actually trying cases and litigating motions. You'll hear candidates tell you that they have a lot of experience, that they're litigators, that they regularly appear in court over their career, but not many of them have spent as much time in court or have tried as many cases as I have. And what some people may not know is that the Court of Common Pleas is primarily a trial court. What's more, in my career, I've had the opportunity to see how the criminal justice system affects communities, victims, defendants, and all the families involved. Criminal law involves the highest stakes of all the legal fields. There's nothing more precious than freedom and life, both of which are exclusively limited to the criminal law field. Prosecuting nearly 100 homicide cases, which includes both non-jury, which are bench trials, and jury, has given me a window into these worlds. And the experience is paramount in gaining the perspective necessary for a candidate to be considered experienced enough to run for judge. And second, a judge must be objective. Civil attorneys and criminal defense attorneys are bound by the rules of ethics to be advocates for their clients. My only client for the last 22 years have been the people of Allegheny County. And it's the same as a judge in that respect. My only goal for 22 years has been to seek justice. That means coming to a conclusion as to what to do with the case based on the impact on the victim, the impact on the community, the defendant's history, and also the impact on the defendant's culpability in the crime charged, and also the defendant's need for rehabilitation. And these are also the same determinations that are outlined via statute for a judge to consider before rendering a sentence. As a DA, when I make an offer on a case or choose to pursue one or withdraw a case, my decision comes only after a careful review of those factors in their totality. No other legal career requires it. By the rules of ethics, the same level of thoroughness and objectivity other than a judge. And third, the judge must be compassionate. While my work experience has given me a perspective into how the criminal justice system can have lifelong impact on an individual, I also believe that being a father of 3 young children has also influenced my perspective. I have an obligation to make sure that they are brought into a community that treats everyone fairly, respects everyone's rights, and provides everyone with the equal opportunity to succeed. And I think last but not least would be that my extensive trial experience prepares me for the technical aspect of being a judge. It's not like you just wake up one day, go into the courtroom, even with the most well-intentioned beliefs that you can do the job. I mean, this takes practice, and it takes time in court, and it takes time trying cases. You have to be an expert in the rules of evidence, the expert in the rules of procedure, which I am based on my trial experience and court experience. So I am a trial attorney that is running for the Court of Common Pleas, which is a trial judge. And I think those are the things that make me uniquely qualified to run for judge and also to earn your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Judge Pappas.
Okay, thank you again, Todd. It's really an honor to be here with you and these wonderful candidates. I'm going to go back to the basics for you, and I'm going to tell you that I'm running for Court of Common Pleas because I'm deeply committed to protecting your rights, our rights, from unfair systems and powerful interests that threaten them on a day-to-day basis. Since my 20-year career in community government and the law began, that is exactly what I have been doing at each and every step. I have set statewide precedents in Pennsylvania, arguing before a superior court and setting a precedent for marriage equality throughout the state, arguing before our Supreme Court and setting a statewide precedent for free speech throughout the state. I've had a multidisciplinary practice that included mostly innocence defense and civil rights litigation. It included filing on plaintiff side against businesses that were discriminating against them in an employment setting. It involved representing debtors in Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 cases in federal bankruptcy court. So I've argued in all different types of venues as an attorney, but perhaps to me, more importantly than that, people need to know that I've knocked on over 10,000 doors in major cities throughout the United States, getting to know vulnerable communities on their terms. And I found it natural to do that because I come from one of those communities. And, you know, I've experienced what it's like to recover from domestic abuse. I have lost friends to gun violence and addiction. I had an incarcerated parent growing up. So people need to know that when you elect Judge Pappas for Court of Common Pleas, you're finally going to get a judge who actually gets you. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Koneiczka.
Thank you once again, Todd, for giving me the opportunity to address your audience. There are a boatload of qualified candidates that are running this year. There are 9 openings, and I think it's great that the public are going to have a wide selection of individuals to choose from. I've been a trial attorney for 34 years. I think it's unquestionable my experience in the courtroom, both at the state, local, and federal level. I've tried hundreds of cases, so I think we can sort of put that aside as to whether I'm qualified in the courtroom or not. Again, the Allegheny County Bar Association rated me highly recommended. I believe that what I want people to take away from the reason why I want to become a Court of Common Pleas judge, it isn't so much to be a trial judge in the Court of Common Pleas in the criminal division. I want to be in the juvenile division. The reason why I ran for magisterial district judge here in Shaler was because of my experience in dealing with adult offenders for 34 years. I think that if we have a more positive impact on our juveniles, our children, at the elementary, primary, junior high, and high school levels, that we can turn things around. Because I don't think we put enough time and effort into that. I've worked tirelessly with the Shaler area school district and trying to be innovative in dealing with juvenile offenders that have come in front of me, whether it's truancy or misbehavior at the school or on the streets of our community. And I can tell you, I've won a lot of accolades as an attorney over the last 34 years, but the most satisfying event that I had in my professional career happened several months ago. When I first took the bench, I had a young man who came in front of me. He had a truancy charge, several other summary charges of disorderly conduct, harassment, criminal mischief. He was deemed to be an incorrigible at the Shaler area high school. He was on a downward spiral, and I took it upon myself to learn where he came from. And as I learned, as a 7 or 8 year old, he actually was an eyewitness to a home invasion in which his uncle was killed right before his eyes. So you can imagine what that would do to us as an adult let alone to a small child. So I immediately, even though there may have been some counseling going on, I put emphasis that this young man needed the counseling and therapy that was needed for an adult who went through something that was traumatic as that. I also then worked with the school to have him removed to go to a new school. In fact, he went to Friendship Academy. Do you know about 17 months later, he appeared in front of my court and he proudly held up his diploma saying, Judge K, I graduated. Not only did he graduate, but he had A's and B's. That to me was so satisfying. And I've had other examples of that with individuals who appeared in my courtroom. Again, I want to have a positive impact. Again, my career with adult offenders, I'll be happy to put that aside if given an opportunity to serve at the Court of Common Pleas level, but in the juvenile division, so that I can bring my vision throughout the whole county, as opposed to, again, trying to be innovative just in my small jurisdiction. So once again, Todd, thank you for inviting me for an opportunity to present to your audience.
Hey, listen, the thanks is all mine, gentlemen. It is such an honor to see my friends potentially going to sit on the board. I cannot emphasize that enough. So if any one of our constituents want to reach out to you guys and they want to learn a little bit more about your prospective platforms, Mr. Zur, how do they reach you?
You can go to my website at www.zur4judge.com. That's ZUR, the number 4, judge.com.
Okay. Judge Pappas.
MikPappas.com, MikPapps.com. Also at Mik Pappas on Twitter, Facebook, and Medium, at Friends of Mik Pappas on Instagram. Thank you, Todd.
Judge Koneiczka.
Well, they can visit my website at dankforjudge.com, and they can actually email me if they want, because I'm interested to know what people expect from either a magisterial district judge and or a common pleas judge. You can email me at dankforjudge@gmail.com.
Folks, this is what it's all about. You know, here you've got 3 tremendously talented individuals who want to sit on the bench, not because, they get a lofty title, but they want to do good. I would personally vouch for either one of these. In fact, I'd vouch for all of them. And I've known them during my professional career, and I suggest that you get to know them as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I know that, your campaigns are just ramping up. So, much love to you for taking out time out of your busy schedule to hang out with me. Listen, if you like this show and you want to see others, please do me a huge favor. Hit like, hit that subscribe button, because fighting for you is what I do. Thank you.